Well, good morning to all of you, and thank you very much, of course, for the invitation, and in particular to you, Per. It's always a pleasure to engage, of course, with the Danish market. Unfortunately, due to my agenda, I couldn't be there in person, but of course, these new technologies allow us today to do this by video. I'm very happy, and by the way, congratulations for your 100th anniversary. It's quite, of course, an important date. I'm very happy always to engage with your industry, and you know that I particularly appreciate the approach that the Danish market has and that the Danish Association has. Of course, defending the interests of the industry, but definitely also understanding that the interests of the industry need to be aligned with the interests of the clients. And this idea that I try also to put forward that the industry should put consumers at the center of their business and of their interests. I think that it's lived in Denmark, definitely, and that's also due to your, I would say, to your work. I think we all agree that consumers that trust, that are fairly treated and are more prone to maintain long-term stable relationships with insurers and pension providers. And so we have definitely then a win-win situation. And I was looking at your, at your goals of your association, and I was quite impressed and happy to see that one of your goals is to use the world's best consumer tools. This is quite, I would say, an important aspiration. I would really encourage you to proceed in this way. The subject of your conference today, data and ethics, is particularly relevant. We are, of course, in this age of big data, and I think it's hugely important if we want to have success in the application of these new technologies and the usage of big data by insurers and pensions, that we engage with clients in a transparent, in a fair, and in a reliable way. This is a fundamental point, so I think it's very important that you have these discussions. Let me say a few words about the way EIOPA approaches big data and new technologies. Data has been both in insurance and pensions, has been always, of course, at the core of the business. This is not new. What is new and what is really profoundly changing and transforming the business is both the amount of data that is being used, that is growing exponentially, and at the same time, the increasing analytical capabilities to deal with that data and to use that data. And all the insurance value chain, we see it already now, is being affected from the product design, where we see, for example, new usage-based products being developed, to claims handling, where we have enhanced fraud analytics, also to distribution with the phenomenon of robo-advice. From our side at EIOPA, we have been having, of course, strategic discussions in this area, and we are, I would say, in a monitoring approach to understand the evolution of the use of new technologies and big data, but having a couple of, I would say, fundamental principles in this area. And one of them is that we should be technological neutral in terms of regulation and supervision. We want to have the same rules applied if the same risk is in there. On the other side, we want consumers, of course, to benefit from the approaches of innovation, and we want that regulation and supervision also enables consumers to take benefit from that. At the same time, of course, we want to maintain a high level of quality and a high level of consumer protection in the market. So this balanced approach between embracing innovation and at the same time maintaining high standards of consumer protection, that's one of our fundamental principles going forward. We have been analyzing together with our colleagues from the banking and the security sector, and we produced recently a report on the usage of big data, where one of the basic conclusions that we have is that until now, there's no evidence that there is, extreme need for new regulation in this area. We believe that in the insurance sector, the combination of the rules that are there in Solvency II, in IDD, the PRIPS rules, also the GDPR, of course, very important, the Unfair Commercial Practice Directive. This is, of course, a huge, I would say, level of regulation, which is important, relevant, and should be used for the implementation of new technologies and the usage of big data. So we are more on the monitoring side, of course. This is evolving very fast, and we see, of course, benefits, but also we see some risks. Let me take a few moments about this. On the benefits side, we definitely start to see more personalized products and services that are more adapted to consumers' needs, to the characteristics and the behavior of consumers. We see definitely a lot of tools being used to enhance fraud analytics and also to enhance the firm's internal organization and efficiencies. And we start to see also this delivering, of course, some optimization of the costs, some reduction of the costs, and also, of course, at the end of the day, this to having an influence in terms of the pricing, having better pricing and reducing also the costs for consumers. On the other side, a very important element that we're also observing is more and more the development of risk mitigation and prevention policies. The use of telematics, the use of house sensors, and this allows companies, of course, to have new products and new services, giving recommendations and giving also price incentives to consumers, which we believe are also very positive and can build benefits for consumers. But let's be realistic, there are also, of course, some risks in the growing use of big data. We can see some exclusion, of course, situations if high-risk consumers will, of course, be put out of selling of certain types of products. There could be issues in terms of the fair and equal treatment of consumers when some non-risk-based pricing techniques are used. It is, of course, difficult to see and to have a clear frontier between what is price optimization and price discrimination. The role of algorithms to use, of course, all of this big data, puts at the center of the discussions the fact that, of course, correlation is not causation, so the conclusions and the outcomes from, of course, all of these statistical analysis needs to be, of course, very well understood and the impact that it has on the fairness for consumers. And last but not least, of course, cyber risk being a tremendously relevant risk in this new big data age. Insurers can definitely be, one of the entities out there in the economy that can be, of course, in facing attacks from cyber, from hackers, because, of course, of the in-depth data that they possess. So, in terms of the work that we are doing in this monitoring element, we are now in the process of finalizing our big data thematic review that we put in place throughout Europe, collecting information from, of course, all different types of providers on the usage of big data. We are now analyzing these results, and we hope soon to produce a report. And one of the issues that, of course, is coming from this analysis is definitely the subject of your conference today. It's a very important element, this area related to ethical standards. As I mentioned, we have, of course, a number of rules. We have, I believe, good rules, of course, in terms of having a high level of consumer protection. But as always, the devil is in the details. It's in the implementation. And I think that it's becoming more and more apparent that for having a good implementation of all these regulations, we would need to discuss, some ethical standards, some ethical bases that can be used across the board by the different providers in order to ensure that there is trust and there is confidence by consumers. I think that this is one of the fundamental elements in this evolution in the sector on the usage of big data. So we welcome your initiative, definitely, and I can mention to you that from our side, we really believe that this is in the interest of consumers, but it's also in the interest of industry to discuss and to hopefully agree in terms of ethical standards for the usage of big data. This is going to be prioritized by EIOPA for 2019. We want to engage with industry, with consumer associations, but also with the civil society representatives, academia, etc. So I'm very encouraged to see that in the Danish market you take the lead on this, you have this discussion today. I'm encouraged by that, and I'm really looking forward to also receive the conclusions of your discussions today to maintain this close dialogue that we have been having with the Danish market. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Bernardino, and I think you'll be happy to take a question or two. At least I have one, which is related to the sort of level playing field competition from international tech giants. So how do we best secure a level playing field for Danish and for European insurers alike, taking that competition from organizations like Amazon and Google into consideration?
Yeah, that's a very important element, and let me just briefly mention that, of course, that is an element that is quite relevant already today in terms of the cross-border business, of course, that is done throughout Europe. We have been, of course, very active from an EIOPAS side in making sure that, of course, cross-border business done through free provision of services is well supervised by home and host authorities. And I think that we have been having also support from the Danish market in making sure that EIOPA's role is strengthened in relation to this cross-border business. But specifically in relation to data and the usage of data and the new business models, I think that there are 2 or 3 elements which are fundamental in order to make sure that we have this level playing field. First is that we have European rules and we have European standards. I think that the temptation to develop national solutions, national standards, national specificities in an area like the usage of big data and new technologies, which is by definition global, I think we should avoid to have that temptation. I really encourage that we have a discussion at the European level and even more at global level. But of course, it will be already very good if we could in Europe have a common regulatory framework. Second point, which I think it's also fundamental and is related to my first observation, is that we need to ensure that we have high quality supervision by every member state. This is a fundamental element to ensure that not only we have a level playing field between the different players, but also that we have trust by all the consumers throughout Europe, trust in the single market, trust in the internal market, because with big data, with new technologies, these possibilities of doing business cross-border are only increasing. And that can be very good for consumers in terms of new products, new services. But from a supervisory side, we need to make sure that we have high quality, common, consistent, convergent supervision. And that's, of course, a fundamental element in the strategy for EIOPA in the coming years.
Okay, Mr. Bernardino, there's just a quick question from the floor, and I was wondering whether you could give a fairly short answer to that question. The question is, should artificial intelligence be regulated, in your opinion?
Well, I think that is still early stages to have a definitive answer on that. As I said, we are monitoring, of course, the usage of the different tools. We're going to have to go deeper, of course, in the coming years in the usage of artificial intelligence and specifically the usage of algorithms, to, of course, underwrite and pricing. I think it's still early days to say that. Until now, we have not found evidence that there needs to be heavily regulation. But I think that this is a particularly important element that we need to get it right. I imagine that in the future we will need these algorithms and these AI tools to be certified by, for example, external elements in order to make sure that as a consumer you can rely that these tools are using data in a fair and in a transparent way. Okay. So we will be monitoring, but the jury is still out there.
Okay, Mr. Bernardino. Thank you very much for joining us from Frankfurt. It's been a pleasure having you here. It was almost like you were here in person. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much and have a nice conference.